Hello and welcome to episode 41 of Beyond a Sermon. I'm your host, Jim Washock, and I am joined as most always by our lead pastor, Shane Schlesman. Every once in a while we give Shane a break and or pull in additional panelists. But we're so
I don't
glad
need a break. I like being with you, Jim.
Oh, well, yeah, you got other people you got to attend to every once in a while.
Well, yeah.
Conferences to go to.
They need a break.
You used to have school to go to.
You all need a break.
Are you done with school, by the way?
No.
Oh.
I'm done with classes almost.
No. Okay.
I'm almost done with my last class. I just have my dissertation to write.
Okay. So
just a small 300-page
just a dissertation.
document.
So anybody that's been on that journey before knows the pain that no doubt that you're feeling. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but you're not quite sure how far away it is, right?
No, not sure if it's a train either. So.
Or a train. It might be. Well, we're so happy that you were able to join us, whether you're watching live at 3 p.m. Tuesdays, hint, hint, for those that are catching this on demand at a later point in time, or if you are watching this at a later point, we're so glad that you joined us. And if you are watching live right now at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, you have the unique opportunity of being able to tell us what you would like to know. So if there's something that Shane said during this past Sunday sermon that kind of spurred a question in your mind, use the comments area on either WEAG.tv or YouTube and go ahead and ask your question. And if by chance you're watching this at a later point in time on demand, you can still go ahead and use the comments area to ask a question. We'll be sure to get that to Shane and he'll answer that. Or you can text your questions in to 804-480-4072. So Shane, let's. This week's sermon was, I think we're on part 8 of Living Legacy. I don't know if we've ever had a series go on this long before.
It's just a once in a lifetime. 50 years, you only do that one time.
Yeah.
So.
City on a Hill was a little long.
That was 7 weeks. That was 7 weeks.
So we may have surpassed that at this point. And this was We Are Family. Yes. And how tempting was it, first and foremost, to sing the song when you were on stage?
Well, it was very tempting, but I have been rebuked in the past for breaking into songs. So I have heeded those lessons.
So no doubt your wife, Sue, and your assistant, Amy, were probably like, don't you dare.
Please don't.
Don't let
We've heard enough of that.
Exactly. Well, it was an awesome sermon and just really piggybacked well on the previous week of many fields but few workers, and just looking forward to delving into these questions. We got 9 awesome questions here, but again, you have an opportunity if you're watching live to go ahead and get your question in, use the comments area, ask your question, and we'll be sure to have Shane answer while we're with him for about the next half of hour. So Shane, let's go ahead and dive on in. I'll let you kind of introduce or kind of recap a little bit of the sermon as you answer this question. So why should all WEAGers embrace being a family of love in which grace is extended and love is lived? What will that mean for them when they do that too?
Oh, great question. I'll sum up the answer in a few words, because you might need us one day. You might need that grace one day. We all will need that grace one day for our friend, for our neighbor, for our family member, for our acquaintance. We desire, and this is what we talked about Sunday, we desire to be a family that is a house of love, that comes in, that you can be invited, that you can, as a worker, if you know the passage that we talked about last week in Matthew, Jesus says that there are many fields but few workers, and he was referring to the world as many fields of people, and that the workers are those who are following Jesus, who go out and reach those people out in the world who are far from Jesus and invite them. Now, as a church, we invite them to the house of God. We used to call the church the house of God. Well, represents the family of God. A church is not a building. It's a group of people who follow Jesus. And that church, for us at West End Assembly of God, is an opportunity to be the love of Jesus to all of your friends, all of your neighbors, all of your family members, and anybody you meet out in the fields, that you can bring them to this house of love.
Very good. And what do you said something this past on Sunday that I want to ask you a little bit more about. What did you mean when you said WEAG will have your back when you invite people from God into our church?
I meant to say that we will rep Jesus for you. we want to be we want to be Jesus for your friends.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to bring their friends, family, neighbors to a place that's incongruent with the very truth that they've been trying to display. So Jesus is supposed to be someone who loves all people. The church is supposed to be a group of people who love all people. Doesn't matter who they are or where they come from or what their behavior is like or what their opinions are or how they vote. None of that matters. If you bring your friend, new friend, family member, person far from God to this place, they will experience the love of God because we will show it to them. So when you bring your friends to West End Assembly of God, when you bring your neighborhood, when you bring your coworkers, we will show them God's love. We've got your back. We won't be that group of people. And I don't just mean the way we treat people in the world, but just common, like, they're our guests. You want to know that if you're bringing guests with you to church, that other people in the church will treat them as their guests.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you come and it's like, hey, you brought them to our house, that I act like, hey, they're my guests too.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you do with a guest? Your house is never cleaner than when you have guests, right? Hey, you give them the best chair. They sit down. I was a guest in someone's house and I sat in a chair like this, and later in the conversation it was referenced that this is somebody's chair, and I was like, oh, you know. So but they didn't say anything about it. They let me sit. They let me have the best chair.
You're a guest.
They wanted me to sit there. And so when you're a guest in my home, there's a chair I like to sit at. It's pretty clear, the recliner, you know. But when you're a guest in my home, I want you to have that. I want you to have we should treat other guests as if they are our guest.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of atmosphere in a house at West End Assembly of God. When you come into our house, we have your back. We want to represent Jesus.
As a longtime WEAGer, I appreciated the reminder of that and the challenge of that, because I'm sure we've all had the experience where we're bringing a friend to some place and we kind of give them a heads up on what it's going to be like, and then when it's not like that, you kind of cringe. You're like, ooh, thinking, I'm sorry.
You hear it all. When you hear everything, see everything through their eyes.
Yeah, you sure do.
And we want to be there for you. If you bring a friend, family, coworker, especially somebody far from God, but really anybody, if they're your guest, they're our guest.
Yeah. This, of course, can be a challenge, but it's not a challenge for us just today. It was a challenge apparently for the early church
That's
too.
Right. That's right.
So much of this was all new for them.
Yeah.
And you cited passages from both 1st and 2nd Corinthians in regards to highlight the tension between love and truth that they faced. Peter was told by God not to call impure that which he had cleaned. And you also talked about all laws were reduced to 2 so as not to be an obstacle to Gentiles. Can you explain a little bit more about what the early church faced and what that whole law thing was?
That was a whole lot of stuff right there.
Yes.
So Acts chapter 10, Luke records the history of the church that Jim's referencing. And Acts chapter 10, Peter has this dream about reaching out beyond the Jewish culture and reaching to the Gentiles. And so he obeys that and he does that. And then churches are launched all over the area. And there's the Jerusalem Council gets together, and Peter stands up and talks about what one of the Jesus disciples, one of the main 12, gets up there on one side and talks about all these people coming to Jesus, coming into the Jewish culture to follow Jesus as the Messiah, but talking about circumcision. I'm talking, it's exactly what you think it is. And so if you're a man and you want to come to Jesus, I'm pretty sure the numbers were not too high.
It's not a great sales pitch. Let me put it that way. That's right.
There would be plenty of room at the altar.
Like, can I just pay an initiation fee?
Anything.
Yeah, that's right.
But they're actually talking like that because there are all these laws that you should follow and hundreds of laws. James stands up at the council, and he stands up, and this is all recorded in Acts chapter 15 by Luke, an historian who wrote it down, and follower of Jesus himself. He saw this eyewitness. James, the brother of Jesus, stands up and he begins to talk about the issues that they were challenged with. And so he reduces it all and suggests that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles to come to Jesus. And that idea is exactly the idea that we want to and need to embrace today.
Yeah.
That we should not make it difficult for the world to come to Jesus. And there's some Christians who struggle with that.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, now their struggle in their day, Jim, was meat offered to idols, idol worship. Well, you can't get any more contrary to Jesus and the church than the worship of idols.
Yeah.
And they mentioned two things, immorality and a sexual immorality and meat offered to idols. But the reason they offered those two things was because it would be so confusing for the world. It wasn't because for the church, because honestly, they would have listed way more laws.
Yeah.
Circumcision was the issue for the Jewish culture church then, and the synagogues, much bigger than these. But this was confusing to the world. If you're associated with the idol worship, or are you associated with the church? So the one thing they said to the Gentiles coming in is, hey, idol worship and temple prostitutes, which is what they had, meat offered to idols and temple prostitutes, exactly opposite of the church. If you're associated with that, it's going to be impossible for you to cross this barrier. But we want to make it easy for you to come to Jesus, and that should be our goal today, that we want people. Now, Jesus' calling is not an easy call.
No.
I'm not saying make the call easy, because Jesus and following the truth of Jesus, but it shouldn't be hard to get to the truth. There shouldn't be a list of rules that you have to follow in order to be able to hear the truth. And that's what James's point was. That's what the Jerusalem Council decided to do. And that's what they sent Paul and Barnabas back to the church at Antioch and to the surrounding churches with this message, that we want you to come to Jesus, setting all these laws aside.
Yeah.
We just want you to hear this message.
Yeah. And the same is true today. We want the same today. But so jumping back forward to the year 2019, and that can be challenging in new ways,
Yep.
especially with the prevalence of social media and 24/7 news. So I want to ask you to really help those that are watching that struggle with discussing certain contentious topics out in the world. What are the rules of engagement for within a couple different ways in which we can live in love and truth when we're discussing contentious topics with non-believers? And I've got a couple I've asked you to perhaps touch on, one being defense of marriage and the other being sexuality and gender, because these are very hot issues that we hear a lot about in the news and online.
Yeah. You know, I look at it this way as, let's boil it down into principle that can be applied to any situation. So that way,
Right.
whether it be homosexuality, and that's a whole lifestyle situation of that the church has become known almost to as gay bashers and people who hate other people, and a lot of hatred has been thrown around in these. But there's elements of, well, what does the Bible teach about it? What does Jesus think about this? And both are important, but how do we what guides the conversation to reach into these groups of people, or to have conversations like this with people when you differ in opinion? And I would say this, rule number one, people over opinions. People always trumps opinion.
Yeah.
So you may have a strong opinion about something, but the opinion is not more important than the person. That should guide the conversation. So when you're in a conversation with somebody who disagrees, or honestly in any format, as a follower of Jesus, I think we would be wise to make sure that people are always more important than our opinions, over opinions. So people over opinion, and secondly, the gospel over behavior. The most important truth that we can't correct people into the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
as in the world. Paul said, what business is of mine to judge the behavior of those outside the church? If I want to judge the behavior of someone, I ought to do it with someone that I love as a follower of Jesus. You and I, if I see something in your life, if I truly love you, I should point that out and say, hey, I love you, but this is something you should think about, Jim. I don't think this lines up with what Jesus would want for you.
Right. And because we know each other,
yeah,
I would be more inclined
because
to listen.
I have a relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Relationship is the filter that you hear truth in. But when you don't have relationship, there's no filter, so you take it as judgment.
Yeah, yeah.
And
the wall goes up. Yeah.
The wall goes up.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have a conversation with people about something you disagree with in any field whatsoever, if we're going to have any chance of addressing groups of people who are far from God, we certainly won't be able to do it without putting them above our own opinion, putting people first and the gospel over behavior. Let Jesus and the Holy Spirit do what Jesus wants to do, which is reach people, transform lives. Believe me, the Holy Spirit has not let one element of my life go unaddressed. Every piece of my life will be contacted and connected with God and totally transformed. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, the Apostle Paul said. We want people to meet Jesus, and we want the Holy Spirit to transform lives. So when we address them, we put people first, lifting up others above ourselves, Paul said. And we put the gospel. I came to save the lost. That's what Jesus' message was.
Yeah.
And we want the lost, those who are far from God, to hear the message of Jesus, which means the gospel is the most important truth before truths that impact behavior.
So just to clarify, make sure I understand all right, and for the benefit of our viewers, if I'm talking with someone, a non-believer perhaps, about one of these issues, I can share the foundation of my truth as it resides within faith from my own personal perspective, as long as I'm not telling them what they should or should not believe or behave.
Well,
Correct?
I think absolutely, and I kind of jumps to later on. I think there's a question asked later on about that too, but we can jump there now if you want to.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's do it.
But
we can
I
rearrange
think
the question.
Yeah, we can. But I think someone asked in the last section, which is there's a phrase in the passage of perfect love casts out fear.
Right. Yeah.
So, what do I mean? What do I mean by this? And how do we balance? Oh, I don't know. That was the question. I'm sorry.
Balance.
There was a question about balance.
How do we balance grace and truth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
So,
if you want to throw that
how do
one
we
out,
balance?
Nikki? Yeah.
The number 2 of the last section.
Yeah.
That question. How do we balance? That's what you're really asking.
Yeah.
How do we balance truth and grace? And both are important because no one's going to live out the truth perfectly.
Right.
So how do we
That's
balance?
true.
Well, I think balance is the wrong picture. I don't think Jesus came and was a perfect balance of 50-50 between truth and grace. I think he was all in truth and 100% truth and 100% grace. It was 100%, 100%. You live 100% truth in your life. Have a conviction that drives you. Just because you have for instance, let's say your conviction is homosexuality is a sin. To someone listening right now, if you're a homosexual, that's very offensive. Because you say, well, you're calling me like a derogatory thing. Well, as we are in conversation, first of all, if I have no relationship with you, you're exactly right. It just comes off as a judgment.
Right.
My desire would be to build a relationship with you and learn from you and listen to you and you the same listen and learn from me. And if we did that, if you believed that people were ahead of my opinion and that you were important to me, just like you are important to Jesus, I 100% will live in grace. That maybe your behavior or your lifestyle does not line up to what I believe and I'm convicted in my life and for everyone's life as an absolute truth. But you don't believe that. So we live in both. 100% a conviction that is true north for my life. This is what drives my beliefs and who I am and what I believe. At the same time, 100% grace for the fact that, hey, I don't even live up to my own convictions, okay? I can tell you, I'm a hypocrite. I strive to live in a truth that guides my life, but I fail at it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think I need to be able to live in truth, but also live fully in grace.
Mm-hmm.
And that guides our interaction and our relationship.
Yeah. Shane, I think it's, at least speaking for me, it's great to get, a refresher on this on Sundays and then hear about it again on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
But there's a challenge to do this on a daily basis. How can we perhaps be more mindful every day of what Jesus thinks of us loving all people versus what others think of us loving all people?
Yeah, well, first of all, great question, because this is what I won't say Jesus struggled with it,
Mm-hmm.
the church struggled with it. Because the church, back in the day, all these synagogues, Jesus showing up to these Jewish synagogues, they are ripping him for hanging out with sinners.
Yeah.
He hung out with people who were prostitutes. He hung out with, wait a minute, no. I'm not, and not in an inappropriate way.
Right.
Jesus went to people's houses, and at these gatherings were tax collectors, which was like hanging out with the mafia. Going to the restaurant where they eat and building a relationship with them, and going to the places where they hang out, and to the town squares where they were at. Jesus actually liked people and loved people in the world, and they liked him.
Yeah.
He liked the world, and the world liked him, and he got criticized for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to be prepared that there'll be people in the church that don't understand and criticize your relationship with people who are far from God. But be of good cheer, because you are in good company with Jesus. He ate with sinners. He ate with people far from God. And they need the truth, and they need to be in relationship with you. And you can't be a worker in the field if you never go to the field.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I understand. I think we have to be more concerned what the mission of Jesus guiding our life, and not the opinion of other people guiding our life.
Mm-hmm. What gets in the way of this, Shane? Is it fear? Is it regret for our own insecurities or past mistakes? You've mentioned this passage, perfect love casts out all fear.
Yeah.
Is that related to our ability to be able to be loving like Jesus every day?
I think that's a great. I love that part of the passage, and I didn't get a lot of time, so I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad the question came up, because I didn't get a lot of time to really deal with that. But there's a phrase in the passage that we talked about Sunday that says, "Perfect love casts out fear." Well, you're talking about Jesus, who has perfect love, so it's like, okay, we could just skip that over and not think much of it. But I think it really does relate to us today. That the church is afraid of the world is afraid of the church. Yeah. The church has become known for what they're against, and the world has become known for not liking the church for it. Mm-hmm. And essentially, what I want us to become known for as a church is the love of Jesus and who we're for, just like what Jesus was for. Jesus was for all people. So, as a church, we need to become known for who we stand with, which is all people, and the love for all people. When you are introduced to that kind of love, your fear is set aside.
Sure.
I've got to witness this multiple times in my life. I've been privileged to watch when someone encounters true love, and I've been the recipient of that kind of love. And when I immediately encounter it, it sets my fear aside.
Yeah.
Have you ever met a group of people that you were fearful of because of past experience, but then you met somebody who totally changed your perspective?
Yeah. You're like,
Perfect.
Oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. Yeah.
Perfect love casts out fear.
Right.
When you experience a true loving act, someone who loves you and really loves you, not conditionally, it sets aside all fear. And people who are far from God, people who are afraid in the church and people who are afraid in the world, cannot stand, their fear will not stand in the presence of true love. And the only true love that I believe you can experience is the love that Jesus gave. God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Mm-hmm. He's the only one who gave up that much for you. There's nobody who will love you that much. And regardless of what the church has ever done to you to make you afraid of it or to make you afraid of God, you haven't experienced the true love of God, because if you have, it will set aside your fear. And over time, as you embrace that kind of love and offer it to other people, you will watch fear fall away.
Yeah. Shane, I think, so we want to practice perfect love on a daily basis, and certainly when we're gathered together.
Yeah.
You gave us a mandate, actually. When we're gathered together as WEAGers within this house, this family of love, the mandate was assume people far from God are in the room. And you likened that to how we prepare our house when we have guests coming over. And so I'm expecting that, or at least I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, that it doesn't mean you have to be on your absolute best behavior. Because if we look perfect, well, that could be almost off-putting as well. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, what then, with that mandate, when visitors come, should they see, should they hear, and should they experience in this house?
You know, it's just the same as if what you would hope they would experience from any follower of Jesus that was actually praying this prayer. Let the mind of Jesus be in me. Let the acts of Jesus, the way Jesus thinks, the way Jesus sees people, the way he loves all people, let that mindset be who I am and who I desire to be. I would dream of people thinking, I mean, I'm not so arrogant to think this could happen of me, but I guess a dream would be that they would say, wow, that somebody might say, I can't even say it about myself because I just know it's not true, but I wish it were, like, man, Jim is the most gracious guy I've ever met in my life, just the most kind person I've ever met. He's the most giving person I've ever met, the most loving person I've ever met. I've never met anyone who loves like Jim. Mm-hmm. But then Jim introduces me to his church, and I go, and you say, wow, you don't even know. Like, there's a whole group of people.
I'm not alone. There's more.
There's a whole army of us who love this way. Can you imagine having a church that when you walk in, you say, whoa, you're overwhelmed with the most kind group of people you've ever met, the most generous group of people who are willing to give up their space and welcome you in and make it about you and how you're experiencing. What are you seeing? How can I explain this to you? How can I help you in your experience? How can I help you understand this? And how can I help your needs? How can I meet your needs? How can I go with you? I've heard stories just this past Sunday of people going to lunch together, met for the first time and spending a few hours together, getting to know one another. And they strike up this friendship. And we want and desire to have everyone who comes into this church, into West End Assembly of God, for everything they see, everything they hear, and everything they experience to line up with the love of Jesus. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. We want everything they see, everything they hear, and everything they experience to line up with the love that Jesus desires for them to experience in the church.
Yeah. Which is a welcome reprieve from what they experience the other days of the week as they're out in the workforce and so forth.
I would think so in a massive way. And it ought to be so countercultural and so it doesn't even blows their mind that there's a place that is this loving. And I know that the church in general has a reputation of not being that way. And that's a shame, but let's not give up because of that. Let's strive to be the church that loves. If you bring a guest into this house, you bring them into a house of love, and we've got your back. We will love them and strive to love them the way Jesus intended.
All right. Well, let's end on that note for sure, because that sums it up perfectly. Shane, thank you so much for delving deep into such an awesome sermon. I feel like it's the sermon we could have every single Sunday.
Yes.
That great reminder.
That's right.
Can we just get that like emblazoned on above our doors? We are family or something on every entrance. But Shane, we've got a really special couple weeks coming up.
Yes.
This Saturday in particular, March 2nd, means what to us?
It's our 50th year anniversary,
Woo-hoo!
so we're
All
50
right.
years old. Happy birthday,
That's
WEAG.
right. So, and we're going to celebrate, because of course church doesn't happen on Saturday.
Yeah.
We are celebrating starting on Sunday, the 3rd, and we have a special guest who is?
Dr. Bob Roden, founding pastor of West End Assembly of God, is going to be in the house on Sunday. I can't wait for you to hear some of the stories and impact that God has done over the last 50 years at West End Assembly of God. We're celebrating other things. A lot of our former pastors are going to be with us Sunday who are still here and in town, and we have many of them still in our church. In fact, we're looking forward to celebrating. We've got lots of things planned, photo booth and a wall that's going to be decorated with the whole story of WEAG, some special videos that are going to be in the hallway, some of that in the service as well, special music. Our kids choir is going to make an appearance.
Woo-hoo.
And
Kids ministry.
We've got a kids show coming up called Love Your Neighbor, and it works perfect with everything that God's been saying through us as well. So I'm excited. It's going to be a great weekend.
Yeah, and I know we already went through the questions, but something you just said reminded me to tell you how much WEAG's family is. Shane is, for those who don't know, the 3rd leading pastor of WEAG.
Yeah.
The other 2 still go to church here.
They do.
Like,
I preach to them, or they allow me to preach to them every week. It's amazing. It's pretty miraculous in itself. So.
You don't always see that, so it's really, really awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to look forward to hearing from Dr. Bob Roden on Sunday. So please join us at Sunday, 10 a.m. on site or online for that special message. Join us as well Thursday night. We have a special guest, writer, pastor Mark Batterson.
Yes.
On Thursday night, the 7th,
Yes,
right?
correct.
And then second pastor, John Hirschman, speaks the following Sunday on the 10th. So,
Absolutely.
and we'll be bringing you a special live featuring them in the mix to this too.
Yeah.
We're going to work on exactly what day that is. Well, we want to thank you very much for tuning in to episode 41 of Beyond a Sermon. Again, if you have a question that comes to mind after watching this, please go ahead and use the comments area. You can still ask it, even watch this on demand later, or you can text that in to 804-480-4072. And thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, Shane. Have a blessed week.